This grizzly bear collapsed in the middle of the zoo. What this human baby did put everyone in tears. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the Pinewood City Zoo that Saturday afternoon. Families moved from exhibit to exhibit, seeking momentary refuge in the patches of shade cast by tall trees. Among the crowd was Emma Bennett, pushing a stroller with her 11-month-old daughter, Lily. The baby girl sat wide-eyed, taking in all the colorful sights and sounds around her, occasionally reaching out with chubby fingers toward the animals that fascinated her. "Look, Lily," Emma pointed toward the grizzly bear enclosure. "That's Bruno. He's the oldest bear at the zoo." Bruno had been a fixture at Pinewood for nearly 15 years. Once majestic and powerful, the aging grizzly now moved with a slower, more deliberate pace. Today, however, something seemed different. The bear paced in circles, his massive head hanging lower than usual. His thick fur, designed for the cool mountain regions, was clearly too much for the record-breaking heat wave that had gripped the city for the past week. Visitors gathered along the viewing area, phones out to capture photos of the enormous animal. Children pressed their faces against the safety glass, pointing and giggling at Bruno's massive paws. But Lily remained unusually quiet in her stroller, her bright blue eyes never leaving the bear. "He doesn't look right," said a man standing next to Emma. "Is he supposed to be breathing that heavily?" Emma leaned forward, concern crossing her face as she watched Bruno stumble slightly, his powerful legs suddenly unsteady. The bear's tongue lolled from his mouth as he panted desperately. Several more people noticed, their excitement turning to worry. Then it happened. Bruno let out a low, pained groan that silenced the chattering crowd. His legs buckled beneath his enormous weight, and the great bear collapsed onto the dusty ground of his enclosure. He lay there, sides heaving with labored breaths, completely still, except for the rapid rise and fall of his rib cage. Gasps rippled through the growing crowd. "Someone get a zookeeper," a woman shouted, while others stood frozen, unsure what to do. Emma instinctively pulled Lily's stroller back from the viewing area, but to her surprise, the baby began to whimper and strain against her safety straps, reaching desperately toward the fallen bear. "What is it, sweetie?" Emma asked, but Lily only became more agitated, her tiny face contorting with what looked strangely like concern. The baby began to make a sound somewhere between a cry and a call, her eyes never leaving Bruno's motionless form. What no one realized in that moment of confusion was that little Lily, who had barely spoken her first word just days earlier, somehow understood something that the adults around her had missed. And in the next few minutes, this tiny human would do something so simple, yet so profound, that it would leave everyone who witnessed it in tears. The crowd around Bruno's enclosure had grown larger now, voices rising in a chaotic blend of concern and curiosity. Children clung to their parents' legs, some crying at the sight of the distressed animal. Emma noticed a zoo employee rushing past with a walkie-talkie, but he was headed toward the reptile house, completely unaware of the emergency unfolding with Bruno. "Please, someone help him," called out an elderly woman, her voice trembling. "The poor creature is suffering." Emma felt torn between staying to witness what would happen and protecting her daughter from the potentially traumatic scene. But Lily's behavior was becoming increasingly peculiar. The baby had stopped crying and was now intently focused on her mother's half-empty water bottle tucked in the side pocket of the stroller. "Bah, bah, wah," Lily babbled, pointing frantically between the bottle and the collapsed bear. Her tiny fingers grasped at the air, her message clear even without proper words. Emma furrowed her brow, confused by her daughter's sudden fixation. "What is it, Lily? You're thirsty?" But Lily wasn't asking for herself. She continued pointing urgently, making grabbing motions toward the water bottle and then toward Bruno. A young man wearing a zoo volunteer badge finally appeared, stopping short when he saw Bruno's condition. "Oh no," he muttered, immediately reaching for his radio. "I need emergency assistance at the grizzly habitat right away. Bruno is down. Repeat, Bruno is down." The radio crackled with a response too garbled for the crowd to understand, but the volunteer's face fell. 10 minutes, he exclaimed into the radio. He might not have that long. The bear's breathing had become more labored, his massive chest rising and falling in shallow, rapid movements. His eyes were half closed, clouded with pain and exhaustion. Something clicked in Emma's mind as she watched her daughter's persistent gestures. "Wait, are you trying to tell me the bear needs water, Lily?" The baby's face lit up with something like recognition, and she let out an enthusiastic "Wah, wah!" while pointing directly at Bruno. "The bear is overheated," said a deep voice behind Emma. She turned to find Dr. Marcus Hayes, whose name badge identified him as the zoo's veterinarian. He had just arrived, medical bag in hand, but was blocked from entering the habitat by safety protocols. "We need to cool him down immediately, but the emergency response team is dealing with the situation at the elephant enclosure. They won't be here for several minutes." Emma looked at her daughter, then at the suffering bear, and made a quick decision. She pulled the water bottle from the stroller pocket and approached Dr. Hayes. "Would this help? Could you use this somehow?" The veterinarian's eyes widened with a spark of hope. "Yes. If I can just get to him with some water, it might buy us enough time until the team arrives with proper cooling equipment." But zoo regulations were strict. No non-staff members could provide medical assistance to animals, and the emergency entrance to Bruno's enclosure was locked with a keypad that Dr. Hayes didn't have access to. "The curator has the code," he explained, his voice tight with frustration. "She's on her way, but—" Bruno let out another painful groan, this one weaker than the last. The crowd fell silent, the collective breath held as the magnificent creature's life hung in the balance. That's when Lily did something that stunned everyone. With a strength and determination no one expected from an 11-month-old, she wriggled out of her loosened safety straps and, before Emma could catch her, toddled 3 unsteady steps forward. She lost her balance and plopped down on her bottom just in front of the viewing glass, pressing her tiny palm against it as if trying to reach through to the suffering animal. "Bruno," she said clearly, her first real word beyond Mama and Dada. The massive bear, as if hearing the tiny human's voice through his pain, slowly turned his head toward the viewing area. His eyes, glazed with suffering, met Lily's innocent blue gaze. For a moment, there was a connection between them that transcended the barriers of species and age, a silent understanding that left the onlookers breathless. Emma knelt beside her daughter, tears welling in her eyes. "Oh, Lily, the service entrance," shouted a teenage boy suddenly, pointing to a narrow door partially hidden by a decorative boulder. "My uncle works here. That door leads behind all the north habitats." Dr. Hayes immediately sprinted toward the door, but Emma could see his frustration when he discovered it too required a code. The situation seemed hopeless. Just then, an older woman pushed through the crowd. She wore gardening gloves and carried pruning shears, one of the zoo's landscapers. "Let me through," she said with quiet authority. She punched in a code and the door clicked open. "Thank God," breathed Dr. Hayes, rushing through with Emma's water bottle and his medical bag. The crowd gathered at the viewing area could now see through to the back of Bruno's habitat, where Dr. Hayes and the landscaper approached the fallen bear cautiously. Lily remained transfixed, her small hand still pressed against the glass, her eyes never leaving Bruno. Emma wrapped an arm around her daughter, equally unable to look away as the veterinarian knelt beside the bear's massive head. What happened next would be retold countless times in the days and weeks to follow. Dr. Hayes carefully poured some water onto a cloth from his bag and placed it on Bruno's head, then managed to coax a few drops from the bottle between the bear's parched lips. The landscaper had retrieved a garden hose and was gently spraying a fine mist over the bear's thick fur. For agonizing minutes, nothing seemed to change. Bruno remained motionless, except for his labored breathing. In the crowd, someone began to sob quietly. A father lifted his young son onto his shoulders to see better, whispering explanations that life and death were part of nature. But Lily refused to accept this outcome. She began to tap on the glass, not violently, but rhythmically, like a tiny heartbeat. "Bruno, Bruno," she called, her voice clear and unwavering despite her limited vocabulary. And then, as if responding to her call, Bruno's massive paw twitched. His eyes opened wider, more alert now. With tremendous effort, the great bear shifted his weight and raised his head slightly. "He's responding," Dr. Hayes called out, his voice carrying a note of cautious optimism. He continued to moisten cloths and apply them to the bear's neck and face, working methodically to bring down the animal's dangerously high body temperature. What no one had noticed in the commotion was the arrival of Robert Chen, the zoo's director, accompanied by a camera crew that had been at the zoo filming a documentary about conservation efforts. The cameraman, sensing something extraordinary was unfolding, had begun filming the scene, capturing Lily's unwavering attention to the bear and Bruno's slow response to treatment. "The cooling packs are here," shouted a uniformed zookeeper, rushing through the service entrance with a large cooler. A team quickly followed, carrying specialized equipment designed for animal medical emergencies. Emma held Lily close, both of them watching as the emergency team worked with swift efficiency. Despite the professionals taking over, Lily maintained her vigil, occasionally calling out Bruno in her tiny voice that somehow carried over the murmurs of the crowd. Then came a moment that would later be described by witnesses as nothing short of miraculous. As the medical team briefly stepped back to prepare an IV line for fluids, Bruno, still weak but evidently more alert, rolled onto his stomach and, with tremendous effort, pushed himself up onto all fours. His gaze, remarkably clear now, fixed directly on the spot where Lily sat behind the glass. The crowd gasped collectively. Bruno took one unsteady step forward, then another, gradually moving closer to the viewing area where Lily waited. The medical team froze, uncertain whether to intervene, while Dr. Hayes signaled for everyone to remain calm. "This is extraordinary," Robert Chen whispered, watching the scene unfold through tear-filled eyes. "I've never seen anything like this in 30 years of zoological work." When Bruno reached the viewing glass, he was still unsteady, but the immediate crisis seemed to have passed. The great bear lowered his massive head until he was at eye level with little Lily, separated only by the thick safety glass. He exhaled, creating a small cloud of condensation on the window. Without hesitation, Lily placed her tiny hand exactly opposite Bruno's nose on her side of the glass. For several heartbeats, they remained that way. Ancient wilderness meeting innocent humanity in a moment of perfect understanding. "She saved him," Emma said softly, tears streaming down her face. "My baby somehow knew he needed help before anyone else did." The cameraman captured it all, the connection between baby and bear, the tears on the faces of hardened zookeepers, the collective emotion of strangers brought together by an unexpected moment of cross-species compassion. "He would have died of heat stroke if we hadn't gotten to him when we did," Dr. Hayes explained later, checking Bruno's vital signs as the bear finally allowed himself to be led to a cooler indoor portion of his habitat. Those few minutes made all the difference. Without that water and the quick action. His voice trailed off, the implication clear. As the immediate danger passed and Bruno was taken inside for further care, the crowd remained, emotionally drained, yet somehow uplifted. Strangers exchanged tearful smiles, parents hugged their children tighter, and a palpable sense of having witnessed something profound hung in the air. Robert Chen approached Emma and Lily, his expression solemn yet filled with wonder. "Mrs. Bennet, I know this is unusual, but would you be willing to share what happened here today? That connection between your daughter and Bruno. It could help people understand the emotional lives of these animals, the importance of our conservation work." Emma looked down at Lily, who was now contentedly playing with the straps of her stroller, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "I'm not sure I understand it myself," she admitted. "But if it helps Bruno and other animals like him, then yes." What Emma couldn't have anticipated was how quickly the story would spread. The footage captured by the documentary crew went viral within hours of being released, touching hearts around the world. News outlets picked up the story with headlines proclaiming, "Baby's compassion saves beloved zoo bear," and "The purest form of empathy, what we can learn from a child." 3 days later, Emma brought Lily back to the zoo at the special invitation of the staff. Bruno had made a remarkable recovery and was now resting comfortably in his habitat, the heat wave having finally broken with an overnight thunderstorm. A small crowd of zoo staff had gathered to greet them, including Dr. Hayes and Robert Chen. "We have something to show you," the director said, leading them toward Bruno's newly modified habitat, which now featured more shaded areas and a larger pool. "We've made some improvements thanks to an anonymous donor who was touched by Lily's story." As they approached the viewing area, Emma gasped. Bruno was there, looking much healthier than before, sitting calmly near the glass. But what brought tears to her eyes was the new sign beside the exhibit. Beneath information about grizzly bears in general and Bruno's history at the zoo, there was a small plaque that read, "Bruno's Guardian Angel," dedicated to Lily Bennet, whose compassion reminds us that kindness transcends all barriers. "Bruno," Lily called out from her stroller, recognizing her friend immediately. The bear's ears perked up at the sound of her voice, and he moved toward the glass with purpose, settling himself directly across from the tiny human who had somehow sensed his distress when no one else had. Dr. Hayes shook his head in amazement. "We've studied animal behavior for decades, but there are still mysteries we can't explain. Whatever connection exists between these two, it's something science hasn't fully grasped yet." A zoo volunteer approached with a stuffed toy bear, kneeling to present it to Lily. "This is a little Bruno for you to take home," she explained, her voice catching with emotion. "We've started a conservation fund in your name, Lily. The proceeds will help protect wild grizzlies and improve habitats for bears in zoos around the country." Emma could barely speak through her tears. "She's not even a year old. How will I explain all this to her when she's older?" Robert Chen smiled gently. "You'll tell her that one day, when a creature in need had been overlooked by all the adults around him, it was her innocent heart that recognized his suffering. You'll tell her that she reminded an entire city, and eventually people around the world, that compassion isn't something we learn. It's something we're born with, something we need to preserve rather than lose as we grow older." As if understanding the importance of the moment, Bruno placed one massive paw against the glass. Without hesitation, Lily reached out her small hand to meet it. Behind them, visitors to the zoo had begun to gather, many of them recognizing Lily from the news. Phones were raised to capture the reunion, but unlike the frantic documentation of Bruno's collapse days earlier, these recordings were taken with reverence, with an understanding that they were witnessing something sacred. "Look how gentle he is with her," whispered a teenage girl to her mother. "It's like he knows." "Maybe he does," her mother replied softly. "Maybe he knows exactly who saved him." As the days passed, Bruno's story and Lily's role in it continued to spread, touching hearts far beyond Pinewood City. Conservation donations poured in, and the zoo reported record attendance as people came hoping to witness the special bond between the unlikely friends. But for Emma Bennett, the most profound impact came in quiet moments at home, watching her daughter grow. Lily's first words had multiplied rapidly in the weeks following the incident, but Bruno remained her favorite, spoken with a tenderness that seemed impossibly mature for a child so young. Sometimes Emma would catch Lily looking out windows at the distant mountains visible from their home, and she couldn't help but wonder if somewhere in her daughter's developing mind she understood the connection she shared with the wilderness, a connection most humans lose sight of as they grow into adulthood. The true miracle at Pinewood City Zoo that day wasn't just that a baby somehow knew a bear needed help. It was the reminder that in our most natural, unlearned state, humans are capable of extraordinary compassion that transcends every boundary we've constructed between ourselves and the world around us. 6 months passed, and winter settled over Pinewood City with a blanket of pristine snow. The zoo had transformed during this time, partly due to the Bruno and Lily Fund that had raised over $2 million for animal welfare and habitat improvements. Bruno's enclosure now featured a climate-controlled environment that would prevent any repeat of his near-fatal heat exhaustion, and similar upgrades were being implemented throughout the zoo. Emma had returned to her job as an elementary school art teacher, but life was far from normal. The media attention had eventually subsided, but Lily, now 17 months old and walking confidently, had become something of a local celebrity. Parents would approach them in grocery stores, at parks, and even at Emma's school, eager to tell their children, "That's the little girl who saved the bear." Dr. Hayes had stayed in regular contact with the Bennetts, fascinated by Lily's continued development and her seemingly intuitive understanding of animals. He had begun a research project, with Emma's permission, studying what he called pre-verbal empathic recognition, the ability some children might have to sense distress in other species before they had the language skills to express it. "There's something special here," he told Emma during one of his visits to their home, watching as Lily carefully interacted with their elderly cat, Milo. "She approaches animals differently than most children her age. There's a patience, an awareness." Emma nodded, having observed this herself. "It's like she can read them." What neither of them knew was that their casual observations would soon be put to an extraordinary test. It was a frigid Tuesday morning in January when Emma received an unexpected call from Robert Chen. "Mrs. Bennett," the zoo director began, his voice tense. "I wouldn't ask this under normal circumstances, but we're facing a situation with Bruno." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Is he sick again?" "No, not exactly," Chen hesitated. "He's refusing to eat. It started about 2 weeks ago. At first, we thought it might be a minor digestive issue, but all tests have come back normal. He's physically healthy, but he's lost interest in food, in enrichment activities, and everything. Dr. Hayes suggested it might be, well, this might sound strange, but he thinks Bruno might be experiencing depression." Emma frowned, cradling the phone against her shoulder as she watched Lily stack colored blocks on the living room floor. Depression? Can bears get depressed? Absolutely, Chen confirmed. Animals in captivity, especially intelligent ones like bears, can develop behavioral changes similar to human depression. We've tried everything in our standard protocols: medication, enrichment changes, even bringing in specialists from other zoos. Nothing's working. There was an uncomfortable pause before Chen continued. Dr. Hayes suggested that maybe Bruno misses Lily. I know it sounds far-fetched, but the timing correlates. He started declining about the time we had that heavy snowfall, when visitor numbers dropped significantly. It's been nearly 2 months since your last visit. Emma watched her daughter, who seemed to have become interested in the conversation, her head tilted as if listening intently. You want us to visit Bruno? You think that might help? I understand if you think it's an imposition, Chen said quickly, especially in this weather. But yes, Doctor, Hayes believes there's a chance it could make a difference. The connection between them was unusual, to say the least. Before Emma could respond, Lily toddled over and reached for the phone. Bruno, she asked, her pronunciation of Bruno's name still imperfect but unmistakable. Emma stared at her daughter in astonishment. How could she possibly know who they were discussing? We'll come, Emma decided aloud. Tomorrow morning? Chen's relief was audible. Thank you, Mrs. Bennet. We'll make all the arrangements, and please, this isn't for publicity. We're keeping this visit private. The following morning dawned with heavy gray skies threatening more snow. Emma bundled Lily in her warmest clothes and drove carefully through the quiet streets to the zoo. As promised, they were met at a side entrance by Dr. Hayes, who led them quickly through the empty pathways. Most of the zoo is closed to the public today due to the weather, he explained, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Bruno is in his indoor habitat. He's been there for nearly a week now, refusing to go outside even during the warmer hours. As they approached the bear complex, Emma was struck by how different it looked compared to that sweltering summer day. The outdoor enclosure was dusted with snow, the artificial stream partially frozen, the viewing area completely deserted. Dr. Hayes led them through a staff entrance into a monitoring room with large windows overlooking Bruno's indoor habitat. The space was impressive, designed to mimic a mountain cave system with different levels, comfortable resting areas, and even a small heated pool. But Bruno himself was a concerning sight. The once magnificent bear lay curled in a corner, his back to the viewing area, his massive body noticeably thinner than Emma remembered. He's lost nearly 80 pounds, Dr. Hayes said quietly, answering her unspoken question. At this rate. He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Lily squirmed in Emma's arms, pointing eagerly at the glass. Bruno! Bruno! The bear's ear twitched slightly, but he didn't turn. Dr. Hayes knelt beside them. Lily, would you like to say hello to Bruno? He asked gently. The toddler nodded enthusiastically, and Emma set her carefully on her feet. With Dr. Hayes and Emma hovering protectively nearby, Lily approached the glass, pressing both hands against it. Bruno sad? She asked, surprising both adults with her perception. For several long moments nothing happened. The bear remained motionless in his corner, and Emma began to wonder if this had been a mistake. Perhaps the connection they'd witnessed had been a one-time phenomenon, or maybe they had all read too much into it. Then, slowly, Bruno rolled over and lifted his massive head. His eyes, dull and listless, scanned the viewing area until they landed on Lily. For a heartbeat, nothing changed. Then something flickered in those eyes. recognition. With effort that seemed almost painful to watch, the great bear pushed himself to his feet and lumbered toward the glass, stopping directly opposite Lily. "Remarkable," whispered Dr. Hayes, careful not to break the moment. Emma felt tears prick her eyes as Bruno placed one paw gently against the glass where Lily's small hands rested. The contrast was striking. The bear's paw larger than Lily's entire body, yet touching the barrier with such delicacy it barely made a sound. "Bruno play?" Lily asked, her voice bright and expectant. To everyone's astonishment, the bear made a soft, huffing noise that almost sounded like agreement. He moved away from the glass toward a large rubber ball that had been ignored for weeks, nudged it experimentally with his nose, then pushed it toward the viewing area with surprising gentleness. "I don't believe what I'm seeing," Dr. Hayes murmured, hastily taking notes on a tablet. "He hasn't shown interest in enrichment items since before Christmas." For nearly an hour they watched as Bruno engaged with various toys in his habitat, occasionally returning to the glass to check that Lily was still there, watching him. The toddler giggled and clapped her hands at each new activity, calling encouragement in her limited vocabulary. By the time they prepared to leave, Bruno had accepted a small offering of fruit from his keeper, the first food he'd voluntarily taken in days. "This is more than just an interesting anecdote now," Dr. Hayes said as he walked them back to the entrance. "There's something happening here that deserves serious scientific study. With your permission, Mrs. Bennet, I'd like to establish a more regular visitation schedule. Nothing excessive, maybe once or twice a month, but consistent. I believe Bruno responds to Lily in a way that defies conventional understanding of animal behavior." Emma nodded, watching as her daughter waved goodbye to the zoo, still saying "Bruno" every few steps. "I think that would be fine, as long as it's not too disruptive for either of them." What began as occasional visits soon evolved into something far more structured. Dr. Hayes secured a research grant to study the unusual bond, and by spring, a small team of animal behaviorists, child development specialists, and even neurologists had become involved in what was now officially called the Bruno-Lily Connection Study. The findings were fascinating. Bruno's health improved dramatically with regular visits from Lily. His appetite returned, his coat regained its glossy shine, and his activity levels increased to those of a bear half his age. Most intriguing to the researchers, however, was the apparent communication that developed between them. Lily, whose vocabulary was expanding rapidly, would often make statements about Bruno's feelings or needs that later proved accurate. "Bruno foot hurt," she announced during one visit, pointing to his left front paw. Initially dismissed as a child's imagination, the observation was confirmed the following day when keepers noticed Bruno favoring that paw and discovered a small but painful splinter. On another occasion, she became inexplicably agitated during a completely calm visit, repeating, "Bruno scared," until the researchers finally detected the subtle signs of an impending thunderstorm, something that had always triggered anxiety in the bear. As word of the study spread through scientific circles, the Pinewood City Zoo found itself at the center of a controversial new field of research. Some scientists dismissed the connection as coincidence or overinterpretation, while others began to consider previously unexplored possibilities about cross-species communication. Emma tried to keep Lily's life as normal as possible, despite the growing interest. She allowed the research visits, but declined numerous television appearances and book deals. Her priority remained her daughter's well-being and normal development. Then came the day that would once again transform their lives and challenge everything the researchers thought they understood about the Bruno-Lily connection. It was early fall, just over a year since Bruno's collapse, and Lily had recently celebrated her second birthday. They were at home on a peaceful Saturday morning. Emma grading papers at the kitchen table while Lily played with building blocks nearby. Without warning, Lily dropped the tower she had been carefully constructing and stood up. Her small face crumpled with distress. "Bruno hurt," she said clearly, tears welling in her eyes. "Bruno hurt bad." Emma set down her pen. "Sweetie, Bruno is fine. We saw him yesterday. Remember, he was playing with his new ball." But Lily became increasingly agitated, pulling at Emma's hand. "Bruno hurt now. Go help." A chill ran down Emma's spine. There had been too many incidents now to dismiss Lily's perceptions. She reached for her phone and called Dr. Hayes. "This might sound crazy," she began without preamble, "but Lily is very upset about Bruno. She says he's hurt. Is everything okay there?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched just a fraction too long. "Dr. Hayes?" Emma prompted, her unease growing. "I was just about to call you," he finally responded, his voice tight. "There's been an incident. A maintenance worker left a ladder against the outdoor enclosure wall last night. Bruno managed to climb it and escape into the zoo grounds." Emma's heart raced. "Is he dangerous? Have you found him?" "That's just it, Doctor," Hayes continued. "We found him about 20 minutes ago. He's injured. He fell trying to climb the perimeter fence. He's cornered behind the reptile house, and he's not letting anyone approach him. The veterinary team can't get close enough to tranquilize him safely. The zoo director is under pressure from city authorities to use more permanent methods if we can't resolve this quickly." "They can't shoot him," Emma breathed, horrified. "No one wants that outcome," Dr. Hayes assured her. "But we're running out of options. He's injured, frightened, and potentially dangerous." Emma looked at Lily, who was watching her with tear-filled eyes that seemed to understand far too much. Could she really take her child into such a potentially dangerous situation? But could she live with herself if Bruno was killed because she was too cautious? "We're coming," she said firmly. "Keep everyone back until we get there." As she hurried to get Lily dressed, Emma's phone buzzed with an incoming text from Dr. Hayes. "Emergency entrance, 15 minutes. Come alone. No media." The drive to the zoo seemed to take forever, though in reality it was less than 10 minutes. Emma's mind raced between concern for Bruno and fear that she was making a terrible mistake by bringing Lily. What kind of mother purposely took her toddler toward a dangerous, injured, wild animal? But something deeper than logic was driving her decision. The same instinct that had recognized from the beginning that the connection between her daughter and Bruno was something extraordinary, something that defied conventional explanation. When they arrived at the emergency entrance, they found Dr. Hayes waiting with Robert Chen and 2 uniformed police officers. Chen's face was grave. "Mrs. Bennett, I want to be very clear about the risks here," he said without preamble. "Bruno is a wild animal in pain and fear. While he has shown remarkable gentleness around Lily in controlled settings, this situation is unprecedented. If you proceed, it will be with our most stringent safety measures in place, and with the understanding that we cannot guarantee your safety or Lily's." Emma swallowed hard. "I understand, but I also understand that if we don't try, Bruno might die today." Chen nodded solemnly. "That is the alternative we're facing, yes?" One of the police officers stepped forward. "Ma'am, as the ranking officer on site, I feel obligated to advise against this course of action, especially with a child involved." "Your concern is noted," Emma replied, surprising herself with her calm conviction. "But my daughter has a connection with this animal that none of us fully understand. I believe she may be his only chance." Dr. Hayes cleared his throat. "I've documented numerous instances now that suggest Lily possesses some form of communication with Bruno that transcends normal human-animal interaction." As his primary veterinarian and the lead researcher on their connection, I support this attempt with maximum safety precautions in place." The officer looked unconvinced but deferred to Chen, who nodded grimly. "We proceed, but with conditions. Mrs. Bennett, you will carry Lily at all times. You will be accompanied by 2 of our most experienced animal handlers with tranquilizer rifles. You will remain behind a mobile safety barrier, and at the first sign of aggressive behavior from Bruno, you will withdraw immediately without argument." "Agreed," Emma said, holding Lily a little tighter. They moved through the empty zoo, the absence of visitors creating an eerie silence broken only by occasional distant animal calls. As they approached the reptile house, Emma could see a cluster of staff members maintaining a wide perimeter around the back of the building. Several held long poles with loops at the end, capture devices that seemed woefully inadequate for an animal of Bruno's size. Chen led them to a position behind a transport crate that had been positioned as a barrier. Cautiously, Emma peered around it and felt her breath catch. Bruno was huddled against the wall of the reptile house, his massive body tensed in a defensive posture. A trail of blood matted the fur on his right hind leg, and his breathing was rapid and shallow, signs of pain and fear. Around him, at a cautious distance, stood zoo staff with tranquilizer rifles raised, waiting for a clear shot that the bear's position against the wall denied them. He climbed 20 feet up the habitat wall and then another 15 over the service area fence before falling. Chen explained in a hushed voice. "The fact that he's mobile at all is remarkable." Lily, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly squirmed in Emma's arms. "Bruno scared," she said, her voice carrying in the tense silence. "Bruno hurt foot." The bear's head swung toward them immediately, nostrils flaring as he caught their scent. Several of the staff raised their tranquilizer rifles higher, but Chen signaled them to hold. Emma took a deep breath and stepped carefully into Bruno's line of sight, still keeping the barrier between them. "It's Lily," she said softly, though she knew it was the child's presence, not her words, that would matter to the bear. "She wanted to see you." Bruno's aggressive posture didn't change, but his eyes, those intelligent, pained eyes, fixed on Lily with unmistakable recognition. "Bruno, come home," Lily said clearly, reaching out her small hand toward the bear. "Doctors fix OE." For a breathless moment, no one moved. Then, with agonizing slowness, Bruno lowered himself from his defensive stance into a sitting position, his injured leg extended awkwardly to avoid putting weight on it. "He's responding, Doctor," Hayes whispered, incredulous despite having witnessed their connection many times before. "Keep going, Lily. Bruno, brave," the toddler continued, her voice somehow carrying perfect confidence despite her limited vocabulary. "Bruno, get better. Come home." The enormous bear huffed softly, then did something that caused several of the staff to gasp. He began to edge forward, dragging his injured leg, moving not toward the nearest exit or toward freedom, but directly toward Lily. "Stay absolutely still," Chen warned, though Emma was already frozen in place, her arms tight around her daughter. Bruno stopped about 15 feet away, close enough to charge in seconds if he chose to, but far enough to demonstrate that this approach was deliberate, not aggressive. He lowered his massive head in what almost appeared to be a gesture of submission. Dr. Hayes stepped forward very slowly with a tranquilizer gun. "Now's our chance," he said quietly. "He's calm enough for a clean shot." Emma felt Lily tense in her arms. "No hurt, Bruno," the child protested, somehow understanding the purpose of the strange gun. "It won't hurt him, sweetheart," Emma soothed quickly. "It's medicine to help him sleep so the doctors can fix his leg." Lily considered this with a seriousness that seemed impossible for her age, then nodded solemnly. "Bruno, sleep now. Wake up better." As if understanding this exchange, the bear remained perfectly still as Dr. Hayes carefully aimed and fired the tranquilizer dart. It struck cleanly in the thick muscle of Bruno's shoulder. The bear flinched but made no aggressive move, his eyes still fixed on Lily. "Bruno, brave," Lily repeated softly as the tranquilizer began to take effect. "Bruno, good bear." Within minutes, the powerful sedative had done its work. Bruno sank gradually to the ground, his eyes closing as the medical team cautiously approached with a transport sled. "Remarkable," Chen breathed, turning to Emma with tears in his eyes. "In 30 years of zoo management, I've never witnessed anything like this." She called him back from the brink of disaster. Emma held Lily close, watching as the medical team carefully loaded the sedated bear onto the transport vehicle that would take him to the zoo's medical facility. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "We treat his injuries, which thankfully appear less severe than we feared," Dr. Hayes responded, putting away the tranquilizer rifle. "And then, well, I think we need to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the connection between these two." The incident made headlines around the world. Toddler talks down escaped bear, and miracle child prevents zoo tragedy. The scientific community, which had been divided on the significance of the Bruno-Lily connection, could no longer dismiss it as coincidence or overinterpretation. In the weeks that followed, as Bruno recovered from his injuries, researchers from major universities arrived at Pinewood City Zoo to establish more rigorous protocols for studying what was now being called trans-species empathic communication. Offers for book deals, documentary features, and exclusive interviews flooded Emma's inbox. But amid the scientific fervor and media frenzy, Emma found herself increasingly protective of the simple, pure connection that existed between her daughter and the bear. She limited the research sessions to twice weekly, insisted on Lily's schedule and needs taking precedence over scientific curiosity, and firmly rejected any attempt to sensationalize their story. "This isn't about creating a spectacle," she told Dr. Hayes during a particularly heated discussion about a proposed television special. "This is about understanding something precious and rare. If we turn it into entertainment, we risk destroying the very thing we're trying to study." Dr. Hayes nodded slowly, his initial enthusiasm tempered by months of careful observation. "You're right, of course, but you must understand, what we're documenting here could change our fundamental understanding of communication between species. The implications for conservation, for animal welfare, for human-animal bonds everywhere, they're enormous." Emma watched through the one-way glass as Lily sat near Bruno's habitat, reading a picture book aloud to the attentive bear. At nearly 2.5 years old now, her vocabulary was expanding rapidly, but the simple, direct quality of her communication with Bruno remained unchanged. "I do understand," Emma said softly. "But I also understand that my primary responsibility is to my daughter, not to science. Whatever this connection is, whether it's some previously undocumented form of communication or simply an extraordinary friendship, it needs to be protected as much as it needs to be studied." As winter approached once more, Bruno's habitat was further modified to allow more comfortable interaction during the cold months. A special viewing room was constructed where Lily could visit without being exposed to the elements, with a sophisticated intercom system that allowed her voice to be heard clearly in the bear's indoor space. On a snowy December afternoon, Emma sat in this room watching Lily and Bruno in one of their now familiar interactions. The massive bear lay close to the glass, seemingly content just to be near the child, while Lily played with a set of wooden blocks, occasionally holding one up for Bruno's inspection. Robert Chen entered quietly, taking the seat beside Emma. "The University of Washington team left this morning," he said. "Their preliminary findings are, well, revolutionary is an understatement." Emma smiled faintly. "Let me guess. They've confirmed that Lily and Bruno communicate in ways that defy current scientific understanding, but they can't explain the mechanism." Chen chuckled. "Something like that, but they've also documented physiological changes in both of them during their interactions, synchronized heart rates, matching brainwave patterns. It's as if they're physically attuned to each other across the species barrier." They watched in comfortable silence as Lily carefully arranged her blocks into a tower, narrating each step to Bruno, who watched with what could only be described as attentiveness. "We've had offers," Chen said after a while. "From other zoos, from wildlife sanctuaries, from research institutions. Everyone wants Bruno now." Emma tensed. "He's not going anywhere, is he?" Chen shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. This is his home, and more importantly, this is where Lily is. We've turned down every offer, no matter how financially attractive. The board agrees that what we're witnessing here transcends monetary considerations." Relief washed over Emma. The thought of separating Lily and Bruno seemed almost cruel now, after everything they had shared. "There is one proposal I'd like you to consider, though," Chen continued, handing her a folder. "The Interspecies Communication Institute wants to establish a permanent research center here, with Bruno and Lily as the cornerstone of a broader study. They're interested not just in this specific relationship, but in identifying other children who might have similar abilities and studying how such connections might be fostered and developed." Emma leafed through the proposal, her academic background in education, giving her a framework for evaluating its scientific merits. "This is actually quite thoughtful. They're proposing a longitudinal study with minimal disruption to Lily's normal development." Chen nodded eagerly. That was a non-negotiable condition from our side. Dr. Hayes helped draft the protocols himself. We believe this could be the beginning of something truly revolutionary in our understanding of both animal cognition and child development. As they discussed the details, a soft thud drew their attention back to the viewing area. Bruno had gently pushed a large rubber ball against the glass, a behavior that had emerged in recent months as his way of initiating play. Lily giggled and pushed her own smaller ball against the glass in response. "The lead researcher has a theory," Chen said softly, watching the exchange. "She believes that very young children might possess an innate ability to communicate with animals that most of us lose as we develop language and abstract thought. Lily's case is exceptional, not because she has the ability, but because it's been recognized, supported, and allowed to develop, rather than being dismissed as imagination or coincide." Emma considered this, watching her daughter's joyful interaction with a creature that most would consider dangerous and unpredictable. If that's true, if children naturally have this capacity that we've been training out of them through conventional development, that would change everything, wouldn't it? Chen nodded solemnly. Everything about how we raise children, how we think about animal intelligence, how we approach conservation. The implications are, well, they're beyond my ability to fully comprehend. As the day's visit came to an end, Lily pressed her hand against the glass in what had become their ritual goodbye. "See tomorrow, Bruno," she said clearly. The bear placed his paw against the glass opposite her tiny hand and made a soft huffing sound that everyone in the room now recognized as his particular greeting for Lily. Emma gathered her daughter's belongings, reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a bear's collapse and a baby's intuition. What had started as a seemingly random moment of crisis had evolved into something that could potentially transform humanity's relationship with the natural world. "Yes," she told Chen as they prepared to leave, "I think we should move forward with the research center, but with one condition." "Name it," Chen replied immediately. Emma looked back at Bruno, who was still watching Lily as they walked toward the exit. "Whatever we learn, whatever discoveries come from studying their connection, the priority must always be their well-being, both of them. This isn't just about advancing human knowledge. It's about honoring a friendship that transcends the boundaries we thought were fixed and immutable." As they stepped outside into the gently falling snow, Emma couldn't help but wonder what the future held for her extraordinary daughter and her unlikely friend. Whatever scientific revelations might come from their connection, she knew that the most important lesson had already been delivered on that sweltering summer day, when a collapsing bear and a compassionate baby reminded a cynical world that empathy in its purest form needs no language, no teaching, and no explanation. It simply is. A fundamental truth that humans have perhaps forgotten, but that Lily and Bruno were helping them remember, one precious interaction at a time. 3 years passed. The Interspecies Communication Research Center at Pinewood City Zoo had grown from a single observation room to a comprehensive facility that attracted scientists and visitors from around the world. Bruno and Lily remained at its heart, though they were no longer the only subjects of study. 6 other children with similar abilities had been identified, each bonding with different species, from a 4-year-old boy in Seattle who communicated with an elderly orangutan, to twin sisters in South Africa who had established profound connections with a pair of rescued elephants. Lily, now 5.5 years old and in kindergarten, had developed into a remarkably thoughtful child, with an eloquence that belied her age. Her vocabulary had expanded enormously. Yet, when she spoke to Bruno, she still used the simpler, more direct communication style that had characterized their early interactions. Researchers had documented this fascinating phenomenon: how she could switch effortlessly between sophisticated human language and what they now called core empathic communication when interacting with her bear friend. The media sensation had largely subsided, though occasional documentary crews still visited to film Bruno and Lily's interactions for educational programming. Emma had eventually agreed to co-author a book with Dr. Hayes titled The Language of Compassion: What a Child and Bear Can Teach Us About Communication, which had become required reading in veterinary schools and child development programs nationwide. Life had found a new normal, with Lily attending school during weekdays and visiting Bruno every Saturday and Sunday. The bear, now approaching his twilight years at 18, had become a beloved ambassador for his species, with countless visitors leaving the zoo with a newfound respect for grizzlies and their cognitive capabilities. But on a crisp autumn morning, as yellow and orange leaves drifted lazily across the zoo grounds, everything changed once again. Emma arrived with Lily for their regular weekend visit to find Dr. Hayes waiting at the special entrance they now used, his face drawn with concern. "What's wrong?" Emma asked immediately, recognizing the tension in his posture. Dr. Hayes knelt to Lily's level. "Lily, would you mind if Miss Patel takes you to get a hot chocolate while I talk to your mom for a few minutes?" he asked, gesturing to one of the research assistants who had been working with them for the past year. Lily's perceptive eyes narrowed slightly. "Is Bruno okay?" The veterinarian hesitated, which was all the answer the intuitive child needed. "I want to see him," Lily said firmly, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had developed alongside her unusual abilities. "Now, please." Dr. Hayes glanced at Emma, who nodded her agreement. They had learned long ago that Lily's intuitions about Bruno were not to be dismissed. "All right," he conceded, But I need to explain something first. Bruno he's getting older, Lily, and older bears, like older people, sometimes get sick. What kind of sick? Lily asked directly. Dr. Hayes took a deep breath. We found a growth, a tumor, in his abdomen during his routine examination yesterday. It's quite large, which suggests it's been growing for some time, though he hasn't shown any symptoms until recently. Emma felt her heart sink. Can it be treated? That's what we're trying to determine, Dr. Hayes explained, leading them toward the medical facility rather than Bruno's habitat. Surgery in bears his age carries significant risks, but doing nothing. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Lily walked silently beside them, her small face serious as she processed this information. At 5, she had already encountered the concept of death, a classroom goldfish, a neighbor's elderly dog. But this was Bruno, her Bruno. He's scared, she said suddenly as they approached the medical building. He doesn't understand why he hurts. Dr. Hayes nodded solemnly. That's why we wanted you here, Lily. We thought perhaps you could help him stay calm while we conduct some additional tests. Would that be okay? Lily nodded resolutely, squaring her small shoulders as if preparing for an important task. Inside the medical facility, Bruno had been situated in a large reinforced enclosure with a specially designed examination table. Currently sedated but beginning to stir, the bear looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable than Emma had ever seen him. Lily moved immediately to the safety barrier, waiting for Dr. Hayes to activate the intercom system that would allow Bruno to hear her voice. "I'm here, Bruno," she said, her voice clear and steady, despite the tears glistening in her eyes. "The doctors are going to help you. You need to be brave." The bear's eyes flickered open at the sound of her voice, focusing slowly on her small figure. He made a soft sound, different from his usual greeting, more plaintive, almost questioning. "Yes, I know it hurts," Lily responded, as if understanding perfectly. "But you need to let them help you." What followed was an extraordinary demonstration of the connection they had developed. With Lily speaking quietly to him, Bruno remained calm as the veterinary team conducted ultrasounds, took blood samples, and performed a more thorough physical examination than would normally be possible with a conscious bear. "It's remarkable," whispered the lead surgeon, a specialist in exotic animal medicine who had flown in from San Diego. "His vital signs stabilize when she speaks. His cortisol levels drop measurably. I've never seen anything like it." After nearly 2 hours of tests, the medical team gathered in the adjoining room to discuss their findings, while Emma and Lily remained with Bruno. "Will they make him better?" Lily asked, her linguistic sophistication briefly falling away in the face of her concern, making her sound younger than her 5 years. Emma wished she could offer reassurance, but she had seen the grave expressions on the medical team's faces. "They're going to try their very best," she said carefully. "The doctors here are the best in the world at helping animals like Bruno." Lily seemed to consider this, then turned back to the drowsy bear. "You need to fight, Bruno," she said with startling intensity. "You need to be strong." When Dr. Hayes returned with the surgical specialist, their expressions confirmed Emma's fears. "The tumor is larger and more invasive than we initially thought," Dr. Hayes explained gently. "It's pressing on several organs and has likely metastasized to his liver. Surgery would be extremely high risk, and even if successful, the prognosis would be uncertain." "Are you saying it's hopeless?" Emma asked quietly, placing a protective arm around Lily's shoulders. The surgeon stepped forward. "Not necessarily hopeless, but extremely challenging. In human medicine, we might attempt a complex surgical intervention followed by chemotherapy, But in a geriatric bear, she shook her head slightly. The stress alone could be fatal. So, what are our options? Emma prompted, aware of Lily listening intently beside her. Dr. Hayes and the surgeon exchanged glances. We could attempt palliative care, medication to keep him comfortable for whatever time he has left, or we could risk the surgery, knowing that it might give him more time, but could also result in suffering if complications arise. How much time? Emma asked. Without surgery? Weeks, maybe a month or two. The surgeon replied softly. With successful surgery, and if he responds well to follow-up treatment, perhaps a year or more, but with significant quality of life considerations. Emma knelt beside Lily, who had remained unusually quiet during this discussion. Lily, this is very difficult news about Bruno. The doctors aren't sure if they can make him completely better. To everyone's surprise, Lily nodded with a solemn understanding. Bruno knows, she said simply. He told me. Dr. Hayes crouched down to her level. What did he tell you, Lily? He asked gently, long past questioning the reality of her communications with the bear. He said... Lily paused, seeming to search for the right words. He said he's tired, but he's not ready to go to the mountain sky yet. Emma and Dr. Hayes exchanged puzzled glances. Mountain sky? Emma asked. Lily nodded. That's where bears go when they're done living here. Bruno showed me in my dreams. It's beautiful there. Lots of salmon and berries and no fences. But he says he wants to stay with me a little longer first. The adults in the room fell silent, moved by the child's words and the implication that Bruno had somehow communicated his own understanding of mortality to her. Lily, the surgeon said carefully, if Bruno could choose, do you think he would want us to try the surgery even though it might be hard for him? Lily looked back at the bear, who was watching her with what seemed like perfect attentiveness despite his sedation. For a long moment they simply gazed at each other, an exchange passing between them that none of the adults could interpret. Yes, Lily finally said with certainty. He says he's not afraid of the hard part if it means more summers with me. Dr. Hayes brushed away a tear, professional detachment momentarily abandoned. Then we'll proceed with the surgery, he decided, tomorrow morning, when we've made all the necessary preparations. That evening, Emma found herself facing one of the most difficult conversations of her motherhood journey. Lily sat on her bed, surrounded by stuffed animals but clutching only one, a well-worn toy grizzly bear that had been given to her on her 3rd birthday. Sweetie, Emma began carefully, I need to make sure you understand about tomorrow. Bruno's surgery is very serious, and even though the doctors will do everything they can, he might die, Lily finished matter-of-factly. I know, Mom. Emma swallowed hard. Yes, and I need you to be prepared for that possibility. Lily nodded, her small face solemn. But he might not, and he wants to try. How can you be so sure? Emma asked gently. Lily tilted her head, considering the question. It's like when you call Grandma on the phone. You can't see her, but you know it's her talking, right? That's how it is with Bruno. I can hear him, but not with my ears. Emma marveled at her daughter's attempt to articulate something so profound and inexplicable. And what does he say to you? Lots of things, Lily replied. Sometimes about being a bear, what berries taste best, or how cold snow feels on paws. Sometimes he asks questions about being a human, but mostly... She hugged her stuffed bear tighter. Mostly, we just feel happy together. Like when you and me watch movies under the blanket. Emma pulled her daughter close, fighting back tears. That sounds like a very special kind of friendship. The doctors don't think he'll wake up, do they? Lily asked suddenly, her perceptiveness once again catching Emma off guard. They're worried the surgery might be too much for him, Emma acknowledged honestly. But they're going to do their very best. Lily nodded thoughtfully. I need to see him in the morning, before they start. I need to tell him something important. Emma kissed her daughter's forehead. Of course, sweetheart, we'll be there. The following morning dawned gray and misty, the autumn sun struggling to break through low-hanging clouds. Emma and Lily arrived at the zoo's medical facility 2 hours before Bruno's scheduled surgery to find an atmosphere of focused tension. Equipment had been brought in from the nearby university hospital, and specialists in both veterinary and human oncology had arrived to observe and consult on the groundbreaking procedure. Dr. Hayes met them at the entrance, his face showing the strain of a sleepless night. Everything's ready, he told them quietly. We've modified the anesthesia protocol based on last night's test results, and the surgical team has been reviewing bear anatomy since dawn. We've done everything we can to prepare. Can I see him now? Lily asked, clutching her mother's hand. Of course. Dr. Hayes led them through the facility to where Bruno was being prepared. The bear was awake but calm, watching the activity around him with resigned patience. When he saw Lily, however, his demeanor changed. He lifted his massive head and made the special huffing sound that was uniquely hers. Lily approached the barrier and placed her hand against it. I need to talk to Bruno alone, she announced with unexpected firmness. Just for a minute. Emma exchanged glances with Dr. Hayes, who nodded. The intercom is on. We'll wait in the hallway. When they had stepped out, Lily pressed closer to the glass. Bruno, she said softly, I know you're scared. I'm scared too, but I want to tell you something really important. The bear's eyes remained fixed on her, his attention absolute. Remember the first day, when you fell down and everyone was shouting? I knew you were thirsty even though I was just a baby, and you knew I was trying to help you even though you'd never seen me before. Bruno huffed softly in what seemed like agreement. That's because we were always supposed to be friends, Lily continued, her voice steady despite the tears now streaming down her face. And when friends have to say goodbye, it's not forever. Not really. The bear made a low, rumbling sound. I know. Lily nodded, as if responding to a specific statement. If you have to go to the mountain sky today, I understand. But if you can stay, I'll be waiting right here when you wake up. I promise. She leaned her forehead against the glass, closing her eyes. I love you, Bruno, more than all the salmon in all the rivers. When Emma and Dr. Hayes returned a few minutes later, they found Lily sitting cross-legged on the floor, looking up at Bruno with perfect composure. The bear had settled into a calm, almost meditative state. He's ready now, Lily announced, rising to her feet with dignity beyond her years. The surgical team entered, led by Dr. Sophia Winters, the exotic animal specialist. We need to begin the anesthesia induction, she said gently. It's time to say goodbye for now, Lily. Lily nodded and pressed her hand to the glass one last time. See you soon, Bruno, she said with forced cheerfulness. As they left the surgical area, Dr. Hayes guided them to a private waiting room where a small group had already gathered. Robert Chen, now the zoo's director emeritus, several researchers from the communications center, and, unexpectedly, Marcus Williams, Bruno and Lily's story, having been one of his earliest assignments as a cub reporter years ago. They said I could wait with you, he explained, rising from his seat as they entered. If that's okay, I'm not here professionally today, no story, no camera. Just, well, Bruno means a lot to a lot of people. Emma nodded her understanding. Over the years, their extraordinary story had touched countless lives, inspiring a new generation of conservationists and changing public perception of bears from fearsome predators to complex, intelligent beings deserving of respect and protection. The hours that followed were among the longest of Emma's life. Lily alternated between periods of quiet drawing and bursts of anxious questions about the surgery. Updates came sporadically from Dr. Hayes. The anesthesia had been successfully induced. The surgeons had located the primary tumor. The procedure was proving more complicated than anticipated, but was progressing. Shortly after noon, Lily suddenly put down her crayons and looked toward the door with an intensity that startled everyone in the room. "What is it, sweetheart?" Emma asked, recognizing the expression from countless previous instances of her daughter's unusual perception. "Something's wrong," Lily whispered. "Bruno's scared." Before Emma could respond, the door opened and Dr. Hayes entered, his surgical mask pulled down to reveal a face etched with concern. "We're facing complications," he said without preamble. The tumor had invaded more tissue than the scans showed. Bruno's blood pressure is dropping, and he's not responding well to the anesthesia adjustments. "He's slipping away," Lily said with quiet certainty. "He can't find his way back." Dr. Hayes looked at the child with a mixture of wonder and professional concern. "That's an unusual way to put it, but essentially correct. We're losing him despite our best efforts." "I can help," Lily said, standing up with sudden determination. "I need to talk to him." "Lily, the operating room is no place for—" Dr. Hayes began, but Emma interrupted. Could she speak to him through the intercom? From an observation room? Dr. Hayes considered this for a moment, then nodded sharply. "At this point, we have little to lose. Come with me, quickly." They hurried through the facility to a small observation room overlooking the operating theater. Through the window, Emma could see Bruno's massive form surrounded by surgical drapes and equipment. A team of gowned figures working with urgent precision around him. Monitors showed alarming patterns of declining vital signs. Dr. Hayes activated the intercom. "Dr. Winters, Bruno's condition is continuing to deteriorate. We have Lily here. Given their documented connection, we'd like to try something unconventional." The lead surgeon glanced up briefly. "His BP is crashing. We're open to any suggestions at this point." Dr. Hayes positioned Lily near the microphone. "Just talk to him, sweetheart, like you always do." Lily nodded and took a deep breath. "Bruno," she called, her voice echoing slightly in the operating room below. "Bruno, it's Lily. I know you're tired and it hurts, but you need to keep fighting." The monitors continued their ominous beeping, showing no change. "Bruno," Lily tried again, her voice stronger now. "Remember the mountain with the big cave that you dream about? The one with the raspberry bushes all around? You need to stay away from there right now. It's not time yet." One of the surgeons looked up in surprise, as a slight change registered on the cardiac monitor. Not a dramatic improvement, but a momentary stabilization. Encouraged, Lily continued. "Remember when you were lost behind the snake house, and you were hurt and scared? You found your way back then. You can find your way back now, too. Just follow my voice." To the astonishment of everyone in the operating room, Bruno's vital signs began to stabilize. Subtly at first, then with increasing strength. "That's impossible," whispered one of the assisting veterinarians, staring at the monitors. Dr. Winters, without looking up from her delicate work, simply said, "Keep talking, Lily. Whatever you're doing, it's helping." For the next 45 minutes, as the surgical team worked to remove the tumor and repair damaged tissue, Lily maintained a steady stream of conversation with Bruno. She reminded him of their shared experiences, described future adventures they would have, and occasionally fell into a rhythm of words that seemed almost like a private language between them. And somehow, against all medical expectations, Bruno remained stable. His vital signs strengthened enough for the surgical team to complete the procedure, removing the primary tumor and sampling tissue from other suspicious areas. When Dr. Winters finally stepped back from the table, her surgical gown stained with blood, but her eyes bright with cautious triumph, she looked up at the observation window and gave a small nod. "We did it," she said simply. "The primary tumor has been removed. There's still a long recovery ahead, and we won't know about metastasis until we get the pathology reports, but he survived the surgery. That's the first hurdle cleared." Through the intercom, they could hear the relief in the operating room, the tension breaking as the team realized they had accomplished what many had considered impossible. But amid the congratulations and relieved exclamations, Lily remained focused on Bruno. "Good job, Bruno," she said softly. "I knew you could do it. Now you can rest, and when you wake up, I'll be right here waiting, I promise." The hours and days that followed were a delicate balance between hope and caution. Bruno was moved to a recovery area where he could be continuously monitored while remaining in an environment that minimized stress. Lily was allowed to visit briefly each day, speaking to him through a special intercom system designed to be heard in his sedated state. On the third day after surgery, as Emma and Lily prepared to leave following their daily visit, Dr. Hayes intercepted them with news. "The pathology reports are back," he said, his expression carefully neutral. "There's good news and challenging news." Emma steeled herself. "Let's hear it all." "The good news is that we got the entire primary tumor, and there's no evidence of spread to the liver or other major organs as we had feared," Dr. Hayes explained. "The challenging news is that there are cancer cells in the lymph tissue we sampled, which means we're dealing with a systemic issue, not just a localized one." "What does that mean for Bruno?" Emma asked, keeping her arm protectively around Lily's shoulders. Dr. Hayes took a deep breath. "It means surgery alone won't be sufficient. We need to consider other treatments, the equivalent of chemotherapy in humans." "Would that hurt him?" Lily asked immediately, her concern evident. "It would make him feel sick sometimes," Dr. Hayes answered honestly. "But it might give him more time, good time, with you." Lily considered this with the solemn thoughtfulness that had become characteristic of her. "I need to ask Bruno," she said finally. Dr. Hayes nodded, no longer questioning her methods of communication with the bear. "Of course. When he's more alert tomorrow, you can discuss it with him." What followed was a period of medical intervention that pushed the boundaries of veterinary oncology, drawing on cutting-edge treatments from human medicine and adapting them for ursine physiology. The team developed a protocol that offered Bruno the best chance of extended survival while minimizing suffering. Through it all, Lily remained his steadfast companion and interpreter. She seemed to know when he was feeling particularly ill from the treatments, often alerting the medical team to changes in his condition before they were clinically apparent. On days when nausea prevented him from eating, she would sit near him, reading stories aloud until he finally accepted small amounts of food from his keepers. The case attracted international attention from the medical and scientific communities. Specialists from around the world consulted on Bruno's treatment, and new papers on ursine oncology were published based on the protocols developed for his care. But more remarkable to those directly involved was the deepening bond between child and bear, a connection that seemed to transcend the limitations of traditional understanding. 6 months after surgery, Bruno had defied all medical predictions. Though thinner than before and moving with the caution of an elderly bear who had endured significant medical challenges, he was alive and showing interest in his surroundings. The cancer remained, but its progression had slowed to a crawl under the innovative treatment regimen. On a bright spring morning, almost exactly 18 months after Bruno's collapse and Lily's first intuitive response, a small ceremony was held at the Interspecies Communication Center. The governor, along with representatives from major conservation organizations, had gathered to announce the establishment of the Bruno and Lily Wildlife Communication Initiative, a multi-million-dollar research and conservation program dedicated to exploring the possibilities of improved human-animal understanding. Lily, now 6 years old and in first grade, stood beside her mother at the podium, wearing a dress chosen specifically for the occasion and a solemn expression that betrayed her awareness of the day's importance. The remarkable bond between this child and this bear has opened doors of perception we never knew existed, the governor announced to the assembled crowd. Their story reminds us that perhaps the greatest barrier to understanding other species has never been their limitations, but our own. As part of the ceremony, Bruno was to make a brief, supervised appearance, his first public presentation since his illness began. A special transport enclosure had been prepared, allowing him to be moved safely from the medical facility to the center's courtyard. When the doors opened and Bruno appeared, a collective gasp rose from the audience. Despite his reduced size and the visible evidence of his medical journey, the bear carried himself with a dignity that commanded respect. He surveyed the crowd calmly, seemingly undisturbed by the cameras and murmured exclamations. Then his gaze found Lily, and his demeanor changed subtly but unmistakably. He moved toward the front of the transport enclosure, his focus unwavering. Without prompting, Lily stepped away from the podium and approached the enclosure, stopping at the safety line that had been established. "Hello, Bruno," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden hush. "I'm glad you could come to the party." The bear made the distinctive huffing sound that had become so familiar to those who worked with them, and Lily smiled, a bright, genuine expression of pure joy that illuminated her face and brought tears to many eyes in the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert Chen announced, stepping forward, "what you are witnessing is the culmination of years of dedication from our medical team, our research staff, and most importantly, from Bruno and Lily themselves. Their connection has taught us that communication transcends the boundaries we thought were fixed and immutable. It has shown us that empathy is not merely a human virtue, but a bridge between species." As the ceremony continued, Emma found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple visit to the zoo on a hot summer day. Her daughter, once an infant barely able to form words, was now a poised young girl, whose unique abilities had catalyzed a scientific revolution. Bruno, once merely an exhibit for visitors to observe, had become a pioneer in animal communication studies and a symbol of the complex emotional lives of creatures humans had long underestimated. The future remained uncertain. Bruno's condition was stable but not cured, and the full scope of Lily's abilities was still being explored and understood. Aye, but as Emma watched her daughter communicating with her bear friend in their special, inexplicable way, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, the bond between them had already changed the world in ways no one could have predicted. Later that evening, as the excitement of the day faded and they prepared to leave, Lily lingered beside Bruno's enclosure for a final, private moment. "You did so well today," she told him softly. "I know it was tiring." The bear gazed at her with the attentive focus that was uniquely hers. "The doctors say you're getting stronger," Lily continued. "Maybe by summer you can go back to your regular habitat sometimes. Wouldn't that be nice? To feel the sun again?" Bruno huffed softly, blinking slowly in what the research team had documented as his expression of contentment. "I start second grade in the fall," Lily informed him, switching topics with the natural fluidity of children. My teacher says we're going to learn all about ecosystems. I told her I already know a lot about bears and their habitats because you taught me. She pressed her hand against the glass, and Bruno raised his paw to meet it, the gesture that had become iconic in photographs around the world. "Sleep well, Bruno," she whispered. "Dream of salmon streams and berry patches. I'll be back tomorrow." As they walked hand in hand toward the exit, Emma asked the question that had been on her mind throughout the day's events. "Lily, when you talk to Bruno, what does he say back to you? How do you understand him?" Lily considered this thoughtfully, her face serious in the fading evening light. "It's hard to explain," she finally said. "It's not really words like how you and I talk. It's more like feelings and pictures and knowing. Like how you just know when someone's sad even if they're smiling." "And what does Bruno tell you in these feelings and pictures?" Emma prompted gently. Lily smiled, a smile of such depth and understanding that it momentarily transformed her young face into something ancient and wise. "He tells me that even though bears and people live in different worlds, our hearts speak the same language. And that's why we could be friends from the very first day, because we both knew how to listen with our hearts instead of just our ears." As they drove home through the gathering darkness, Emma reflected on her daughter's words. Perhaps that was the true miracle of Bruno and Lily's story. Not just that a child and a bear had formed an extraordinary bond, but that their connection had reminded humanity of a capacity for understanding that had always existed within each person, waiting only to be remembered and reclaimed. And in research centers, conservation projects, and wildlife sanctuaries around the world, inspired by the unlikely friendship between a grizzly bear and a human child, people were beginning to listen with their hearts once more, rediscovering a language that had never truly been forgotten, only temporarily set aside in humanity's rush toward progress and separation from the natural world. The story of Bruno and Lily, which had begun with a collapse and a compassionate response, had evolved into something far greater, a catalyst for reconnection, a bridge across the divide between species, and a reminder that empathy in its purest form needs no translation, no teaching, and no explanation. It simply is a fundamental truth that humans have perhaps forgotten, but that a bear named Bruno and a child named Lily were helping them remember, one precious interaction at a time. 5 years later, on a crisp autumn morning, much like the day of Bruno's surgery, 11-year-old Lily Bennett sat cross-legged on a specially constructed platform next to Bruno's habitat. Now, in middle school, she had grown tall and willowy, her once chubby baby cheeks giving way to the more defined features of approaching adolescence. Her eyes, however, remained the same, bright, perceptive, and filled with a wisdom that continued to surprise those who met her for the first time. Bruno had defied all medical expectations, living far beyond the initial prognosis of perhaps a year following his cancer treatment. At 23, he was now considered geriatric for a grizzly bear, moving more slowly and sleeping more often, but still maintaining his special bond with Lily through their regular visits. Today's visit was different, though. Both Lily and Emma knew it, though neither had spoken the truth aloud on their drive to the zoo. "He's very tired this morning," Dr. Hayes had warned them gently when they arrived. "He didn't eat yesterday or today. His breathing is becoming labored." Lily had nodded solemnly, accepting what the adults around her were trying to soften. "He's ready to go to the mountain sky," she said simply. "He told me in my dreams last night." Now, as the golden autumn light filtered through the changing leaves, Lily read aloud from a book. The same book she had been reading to Bruno for the past week. A novel about a wild bear who found his way home after many adventures. Her voice was steady, betraying none of the emotion that Emma could see in the tight set of her shoulders, the occasional quick blink to dispel gathering tears. Bruno lay close to the glass, his massive head resting on his paws, his eyes fixed on Lily with the same attentive gaze that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. His once thick fur had thinned with age and illness, and his breathing came in slow, shallow movements that made Emma's heart ache with the recognition of what was coming. In the observation room behind them, a small group had gathered in quiet vigil. Dr. Hayes, now the director of the International Wildlife Communication Institute that had grown from their story. Robert Chen, retired but still a frequent visitor, and several researchers who had worked with Bruno and Lily over the years. They maintained a respectful distance, understanding that this moment belonged primarily to the child and her bear. As Lily finished the chapter, she closed the book and set it aside. "I think that's enough reading for today," she said, her voice finally betraying a slight tremor. "You're tired, aren't you, Bruno?" The bear blinked slowly, making a soft huffing sound that had become familiar to everyone who knew them. His special greeting for Lily. "I know," she said softly, pressing her palm against the glass. "It's okay. I understand." Bruno raised his paw with visible effort, placing it against the barrier opposite her hand. The gesture that had been photographed countless times over the years, that had become a symbol of connection between species around the world. "Do you remember the first day?" Lily asked, echoing the words she had spoken before his surgery years ago. "When you collapsed and everyone was shouting, I knew you needed help even though I was just a baby. And you knew I was trying to help you even though you'd never seen me before." Bruno's eyes remained fixed on hers, his breathing becoming more labored. "That's because we were always supposed to be friends," she continued, her voice steady despite the tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "And when friends have to say goodbye, it's not forever, not really." Emma moved closer, placing a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder in silent support. "You don't have to stay any longer," Lily whispered to Bruno. "I know you're tired, and the mountain sky is waiting for you. There are salmon streams and berry patches and no fences or walls. You can run again there like when you were young." Bruno made a soft sound, almost like a sigh, his paw still pressed against the glass. "I'll miss you every day," Lily continued, her voice breaking slightly, "but I'll remember everything you taught me. How to listen with my heart instead of just my ears. How to understand without words. How to love across all the boundaries that grown-ups think are so important." In the observation room, Dr. Hayes wiped tears from his eyes, making no attempt to maintain professional detachment. The others stood in respectful silence, bearing witness to a farewell that transcended conventional understanding. "It's time for you to go," Lily said softly, reading something in Bruno's eyes that only she could see. "Don't be afraid, just follow the path to the mountain sky, and someday, a very long time from now, I'll find you there." Bruno's breathing had become more labored, his massive chest rising and falling in an uneven rhythm. But his eyes remained fixed on Lily, unwavering in their focus. "Thank you for being my friend, Bruno," Lily whispered. "For everything you taught me and everyone else. The world is different because of you. Better because of you." As the autumn sun reached its zenith, casting dappled shadows through the habitat's trees, Bruno made one final, gentle huffing sound. His paw slid slowly from the glass, his eyes closing as he released a long, slow breath. And then he was still. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. The silence was profound. Not an absence of sound, but a presence of something beyond words. A recognition of a passing that carried more significance than anyone could articulate. Lily remained seated, her hand still pressed against the glass, tears streaming silently down her face. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but clear. "Goodbye, Bruno," she said simply, "until we meet again in the mountain sky." Emma knelt beside her daughter, wrapping her arms around the girl's slender shoulders. "He knew you were here with him, sweetheart. He wasn't alone." Lily nodded, leaning into her mother's embrace. "He's not suffering anymore," she said, with a wisdom that continued to astonish everyone who knew her. "He's free now." In the days that followed, news of Bruno's passing spread around the world. Tributes poured in from scientists, conservationists, and ordinary people whose lives had been touched by the story of a baby who saved a bear, and the extraordinary bond that had developed between them. At Lily's request, Bruno was not preserved or displayed as might have been traditional for a zoo animal of his significance. Instead, after necessary scientific studies were completed, his remains were cremated, and a private ceremony was held on a mountaintop in grizzly bear country, where Lily scattered his ashes beneath the vast open sky. "He always dreamed of mountains," she explained to her mother as they stood together in the crisp alpine air. "Even when he was at the zoo, in his mind he was here. This is where he belongs." A month later, on what would have been their regular Saturday visit, Emma brought Lily back to the zoo. A memorial had been established at Bruno's habitat. Not a statue or plaque, but a living tribute. The enclosure had been transformed into a native plant sanctuary and education center, where visitors could learn about grizzly bears, their habitats, and their critical role in ecosystems. Most significantly, a new wing of the Interspecies Communication Institute had been dedicated in Bruno's memory. The Bruno Initiative, as it was called, focused specifically on identifying and nurturing the innate capacity for empathic communication that Lily had demonstrated, a capacity that researchers now believed existed in many children, but typically faded without recognition and encouragement. As they stood before the entrance to the new research center, Lily traced the engraved words that had been chosen for the dedication plaque. "In memory of Bruno, 2008 to 2031, who taught us that understanding begins with listening, not just with our ears, but with our hearts." Below these words was a simple etching, a child's hand and a bear's paw touching across a barrier that, in the most important ways, had never truly existed between them. "Do you think it will make a difference?" Lily asked quietly, looking up at the building where researchers from around the world would work to build on what she and Bruno had begun. "Will people really learn to understand animals better?" Emma considered her daughter's question carefully. "I think Bruno already made a difference," she said finally. "He changed how people see bears, how they think about animal intelligence and emotions. And you, Lily, you showed everyone a possibility they hadn't imagined before." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "He told me once, not in words, but in feelings, that bears and people forgot how to talk to each other a long time ago. But they could remember if they tried. And now people are trying," Emma said, gesturing to the research center where scientists were developing new methodologies based on empathic response rather than traditional behavioral observation. As they walked through the zoo that had become such an integral part of their lives, they passed visitors of all ages, engaged with interactive exhibits designed to foster the very qualities that Lily and Bruno had demonstrated: patience, empathic attention, and openness to communication beyond words. Near the otter habitat, they paused to watch a young boy, perhaps 4 years old, sitting quietly by the viewing glass, completely still and attentive in a way that most children his age rarely managed. One of the otters had approached him and was mirroring his posture, separated by glass but somehow engaged in an exchange that needed no interpretation. "Look," Lily whispered, a smile breaking through her lingering sadness. He's listening with his heart. Emma squeezed her daughter's hand, recognizing in the scene an echo of another child, years ago, who had somehow known that a suffering bear needed help. Yes, she agreed softly. He certainly is. As they continued their walk, passing the spot where Bruno had once collapsed and a baby had somehow known what to do, Lily looked up at the clear autumn sky, her expression peaceful despite the loss she was still processing. "Bruno isn't really gone," she said with quiet certainty. "What we learned together, that's still here. That's everywhere now." Emma nodded, understanding the profound truth in her daughter's words. The bond between Bruno and Lily had never been merely about a remarkable individual connection between a bear and a child. It had always been about something larger, a reminder of a capacity for understanding that existed in all humans, waiting to be remembered and reclaimed. In research centers and wildlife reserves around the world, inspired by their story, people were beginning to listen in new ways, rediscovering a language of empathy that had never truly been lost, only temporarily forgotten in humanity's rush toward their progress and separation from the natural world. And somewhere beyond the physical realm, in what Lily had always called the mountain sky, a spirit that had once inhabited the form of a grizzly bear named Bruno, watched over the child who had become his unlikely friend, the child who had recognized his suffering when no one else could, the child who had reminded an entire species of their capacity for compassion without boundaries or limitations. The story that had begun with a collapse and a baby's intuitive response had evolved into something timeless, a bridge across the divide between species, a beacon of possibility in a world too often defined by separation, and a testament to the enduring power of empathy in its purest, most fundamental form. As the autumn sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the zoo grounds, Lily Bennett smiled up at her mother, her eyes bright with tears but also with hope.